In 1688, England witnessed one of the strangest power shifts in European history. A reigning king, James II, was removed from the throne, yet the country avoided the kind of long civil war that had torn it apart only a generation earlier. His replacement was not a conquering foreign dynasty in the usual sense, but his own daughter Mary and her Dutch husband, William of Orange. Later generations called it the Glorious Revolution. The name makes it sound clean and inevitable, but at the time it was a dangerous gamble. Religion, royal power, foreign war, and fear of dynasty all collided. What happened was not simply a palace coup. It changed the relationship between monarch and parliament, pulled Britain deeper into European power politics, and created a constitutional model that would shape the 18th century. To understand why James II fell, it is important to remember that he did not begin his reign as a doomed monarch. When he became king in February 1685, many people accepted him despite one major concern: he was Catholic in kingdoms where Protestant identity had become politically powerful. England and Scotland had Protestant majorities, while Ireland was largely Catholic, and religion was never just private belief. It was tied to loyalty, foreign alliances, property, and memories of persecution. Still, James inherited the throne legally, and many subjects preferred order to another succession crisis. At first, obedience to monarchy and fear of instability worked in his favor. The problem was that James acted as if acceptance meant trust. It did not. His support was broad, but fragile. James quickly began to alienate important groups by pushing royal authority in ways many Protestants saw as threatening. His policies appeared to favor Catholics and to weaken the legal barriers that kept Catholics from offices of power. For James, this could be presented as toleration and justice for those excluded by Protestant laws. For many of his opponents, it looked like a deliberate attempt to build a Catholic power base inside the state. The fear was not only theological. If the king could suspend laws, ignore parliament, and reshape institutions at will, then religion became part of a broader constitutional crisis. People worried that James was trying to rule like an absolute monarch, using Catholic toleration as the doorway to unchecked royal power. The crisis became far more serious in June 1688 with the birth of James Francis Edward Stuart, the king's son. Before this, many opponents of James could tell themselves the problem might solve itself. James was older, and his Protestant daughter Mary was next in line. If they waited, the throne would eventually return to a Protestant successor. The birth of a male heir changed everything. Now there was the possibility of a lasting Catholic Stuart dynasty. That single event transformed anxiety into urgency. Political opponents who had hesitated to move against a lawful king began to see delay as dangerous. If James's son grew up to inherit the throne, the religious and constitutional direction of the kingdoms might be locked in for another generation. A group of James's opponents then took a step that was both bold and risky. They sent what became known as the invitation to William. William of Orange was not a random outsider. He was married to Mary, James's Protestant daughter, and he was also James's nephew. That family connection gave his intervention a stronger claim to legitimacy. But William was also the Dutch stadtholder, a European statesman with his own strategic interests. He did not see England only as a family problem. He saw it as part of the wider struggle against the France of Louis XIV. If James aligned England with France, the Dutch Republic would be in serious danger. The invitation gave William a domestic English justification for a move he already had reasons to consider. William's decision to intervene was shaped by European war as much as English politics. The Dutch States General and William feared French expansion, and the 9 Years' War was beginning to draw Europe into a major conflict. England's position mattered enormously. A friendly or neutral England could help contain France, and England sympathetic to Louis XIV could threaten Dutch security. This is why the Glorious Revolution should not be understood as only a domestic constitutional event. It was also an international operation. William could claim he was responding to English requests, defending Protestant liberties, and protecting the rights of his wife Mary. At the same time, he was moving to secure the Dutch Republic's strategic position. Principle and geopolitics were tightly intertwined. On November 5, 1688, William landed in Devon with a substantial force. The date itself carried Protestant symbolism in England because it was associated with the failure of the Gunpowder Plot decades earlier. William presented his arrival not as a conquest, but as a rescue mission, a response to English invitation and a defense of religion, law, and liberty. James still had an army, and on paper he might have resisted. But political authority depends on confidence, and confidence was draining away. As William advanced toward London, key figures hesitated, defected, or waited to see who would prevail. The king's military position weakened because his political position had already cracked. Armies do not fight well when commanders doubt the cause. James's collapse was dramatic. Instead of a decisive battle, his regime unraveled through defections, confusion, and loss of nerve. Important supporters abandoned him, and the army he needed to defend the throne began to disintegrate. For a monarch who believed strongly in hereditary right, this was more than a military failure. It was a personal and ideological disaster. James eventually fled, and on December 23, 1688 he went into exile in France. His departure helped William's supporters frame the situation as an abdication or vacancy rather than a straightforward deposition by force. That distinction mattered. If Parliament could say the king had effectively abandoned government, it could move to settle the crown without admitting that rebellion alone had made a new monarch. The settlement of 1689 was the heart of the Revolution's long-term importance. In April, Parliament made William and Mary joint monarchs of England and Ireland. Scotland reached a separate but similar settlement in June. This was not simply a change of personnel. It confirmed that monarchy would now operate under conditions defined by political authority beyond the crown itself. Parliament's role became central. The ruler could no longer plausibly claim to govern above the law or against the settled will of the political nation. The Glorious Revolution did not create modern democracy, and ordinary people still had little direct power. But it strengthened the principle that kings and queens ruled within a constitutional framework, not as unlimited sovereigns. William and Mary ruled jointly, but their partnership was shaped by war and distance. William remained deeply involved in European affairs and spent much of the early reign focused on the 9 Years' War against France. This left Mary to govern the three kingdoms alone for significant periods until her death in 1694. Her role is sometimes overshadowed by William's military and diplomatic importance, but it mattered. The settlement depended on her legitimacy as James's Protestant daughter, and her presence helped make William's rule acceptable to those who might otherwise see him as a foreign invader. After Mary died, William ruled in his own right until 1702, continuing to bind British policy to the anti-French alliance he had long pursued. Not everyone accepted the new order. Supporters of the exiled James, known as Jacobites, continued to believe that the Stuarts had the rightful claim to the throne. Jacobitism lasted into the late 18th century and became a recurring threat, especially where loyalty to the old dynasty overlapped with religious, regional, or political grievances. This persistence reminds us that the revolution was not universally accepted as glorious. For its supporters, it defended Protestantism and liberty. For its opponents, it was an unlawful usurpation dressed up in constitutional language. The fact that Jacobitism survived for so long shows that dynastic legitimacy still mattered deeply. The settlement was successful, but it did not erase competing visions of monarchy overnight. The Glorious Revolution left a legacy much larger than the removal of James II. It confirmed the primacy of Parliament over the crown in England and Scotland, strengthened the idea of constitutional monarchy, and redirected British foreign policy toward long-term resistance to French expansion. Some historians even describe William's landing as the last successful invasion of England, though it was made possible by invitation, defection, and political collapse from within. Its power lies in that combination. It was an invasion, a succession crisis, a religious conflict, a constitutional settlement, and a European strategic maneuver all at once. The result was a monarchy that survived by accepting limits, and a state that would become increasingly shaped by parliament, finance, war, and empire. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.